Good morning. Welcome to Alignment. My name is Dasha Kelly Hamilton, and I'm going to be your host for a conversation through one line of poetry. And we're going to have a guest give us some examples and some insight on what they feel the line meant. The Disturbing the Listening Air is a poetry line we're going to be exploring this month. And again, alignment is an opportunity to bring together folks who wouldn't necessarily fall into conversation and to give a random bit of language. Poems are always great inspiration as a place starter to start a conversation about where they've been, where they're going, and what the line means to them. Disturbing the listening air. I promise you won't be able to guess where this poem comes from. But again, this is not what it's about. Alignment is not a poetry class. It is not a gathering of literary experts, although my guest is a literary rock star. But it is an entry point into a really honest conversation that we're excited to have with residents and guests across the state. And so I am very excited to bring Milwaukee's own Karl Iglesias to the screen. Good morning, sir. How are you?
Good morning. I'm feeling good. How are you?
You know what? I'm going to say I'm good. I'm working towards great, but it's better than bad. So not bad for a Wednesday morning.
Yeah, I hear you.
So give us a little bit about who you are, sir. Tell us where you're from, where are you now, and all the good gooey story in between.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm originally from Milwaukee, Wisconsin, from the south side of Milwaukee. Rufus King graduate, and I went to the University of Wisconsin as well. So I'm definitely a Wisconsin boy, a Midwestern boy at heart. I'm from my family's from Puerto Rico, and I carry that with me everywhere I go. And I'm currently right now in Brooklyn, New York, living here, loving life, and still rooting for the Bucks. So I still got all my fandom out here. I'm still watching every game. So. Having a good time though.
That's been wild watching the Bucks logos popping up on social media from all over the world. I mean, folks who are obviously from the city, or maybe have just always been Bucks fans, but especially folks who are from the city who are representing their shirts and their caps all over the place. Mm-hmm. So what is that like for you? And you're representing a lot. So outside of the Midwest, you're representing the Midwest. Everywhere you go, you're representing Puerto Rico. Everywhere you speak, you're representing being an artist. Does it ever get heavy? Or how is that feeling representing all these things?
Yeah, I feel like it's the job, right? It's kind of like the job. It's kind of like, as I'm an actor as well. And like rejection is a part of that job. Like, it's not like you just have to, it's just a part of that job, you know? And so I feel like the representation and the flags we bear, regardless of whatever they are, I think they're a part of being a writer, right? Or being an artist mm-hmm. in general, but like for sure being a writer. One of the biggest, I always get the advice where they say, stay in your lane as a writer, mm-hmm. you know what I mean? And that's what that means, you know what I mean? It's like, don't force it. Don't, you have your flags, fly your flags, tell that story, you know what I mean? Like write what you know, all of those things, you know?
That's interesting. Staying in your lane. I definitely wouldn't have taken it that way, where as opposed to being restricted to a lane, and this is all which is what I've always heard it when I've heard that phrase, stay over where you belong. Mm-hmm. And to flip that a bit, your lane is full of everything that you are.
Yeah.
So fill your lane with all your stuff. Thank you for that.
Yeah.
So how did you find this? How did you come to define this lane for yourself?
I think the journey as a writer came from just learning about myself, and like as a person learned about myself, then my writing, I learned it through my writing too. You know, I was, you know, I've even from. For those who don't know this, I started in Still Waters Collective, where, you know, Dasha Kelly and her Poetry Slam series. And even in that beginning stages was just an angsty teen, like trying to figure out how to write about his parents splitting up, or like about like, you know, these new moments, you know. I think that's important. You know what I mean? I forgot where I was even going with that, but
No, that's okay. We're wandering together. That's a whole plan.
yeah,
I would love to get a little bit of hear you speak a little bit about your recent project.
mm-hmm.
And so, because I have the benefit and the privilege of having watched you work through these angsty moments, from the breakups to your own breakups to just being out in the world, right? And to see this piece of work where it's not a retro. I'm now exploring my heritage. I know that's not the case at all, but you're more full throated, or was it the hurricane in particular that stirred something? It felt very different.
Yeah.
So speak a bit about about that process, even deciding I'm going to write a piece about, my people surviving a hurricane.
Yeah.
Or what was it really about? How did you get there?
Yeah, for sure. Well, Catch a Glow, this my most recent book, it explores like Hurricane Maria in particular in Puerto Rico. And I think this goes back to a little bit of like, write what you know, right? Because I wanted two things. I wanted to do something about it, whatever was going on at the time, like during the hurricane, and I wanted to write what I knew, And so like doing something about it in the sense of during this new time of Trump and during this hurricane, kind of seeing this helpless feeling, super helpless. And I was like, well, like I could be posting, and reposting, Instagram things, which is, there's nothing wrong with that. And I do that too. And that's awesome, but to the next level of what can I do with what I have, and as a writer, with my craft, like Nina Simone like says, like you have to be an artist who comments on the times. And I feel like I have to write what I know, right? And this is me. This is my story, right? The one that, whether I'm burdened with or in charged with, whatever, and the story didn't need to be like, and it was super delicate too, because within this book, I didn't want to like front like I was on the island or that I was even born on the island, right? Like within my community and within being Puerto Rican, and I'm sure there's nuances within every culture of their own. There's spectrums. There's like, oh, where are you from? Or you're from here. Were you born here or were you born there? Like, and there's this different kind of, and so I didn't want to like pretend. So I embraced this idea of journalism and the fact of not knowing, and that the chapbook itself was an exploration of the unknown. It was me making up some things that I didn't know, and I have poems in there talking about lying to people, asking about how I am and how are my family, because I don't know, but I should know, and so instead of fronting like this is some, like I'm trying to tell a story that's not my own, I made it more of an exploration about research and digging in journalism, in spirituality, in my own life, where I was like, okay, this is actually just about me, you know what I mean? But it is like a storm, you know what I mean, of a moment, So like, I feel like they all kind of fit in regardless,
I love that it's a storm in the moment and it's all about you. And we always get to that point in the middle, like, hey, I thought I was writing a piece about peanut butter in childhood. Oh, nope, it's about that time when I didn't. And then even though you're going at it with this very heady and well-researched, and like you said, you did all this digging, and then you're always in the middle of that story. So if you wouldn't mind sharing a bit about this storm of yours and there's clearly a clear day that has happened, but share a bit about what we've learned or what you've learned, because I think that'd be a great for people to read this project and hear all of those narratives, the things you didn't know, because we don't always celebrate what we don't know, and that you are sorting through a storm. And we don't always give ourselves the space to outwardly do that. We're writing ourselves towards fine. We're writing ourselves towards healthy, and sorting through a storm is so honest and generous. How was that process, and how are you on the other side of that?
Yeah. I think it was one, just like discovering what I didn't know, and the knowledge that I didn't have. I've only been to the island enough, like twice, right? Before the hurricane, or like 2 or 3 times, which is not a lot of time, right? And so it was kind of coming to grips with my lack of, or even in general, my lack of, but also, Puerto Ricans in general, like a lot of us here, there's more of us here in the States than there are on the island, right? So there is a natural juxtaposition of who is what, you know what I mean? And who is actually Puerto Rican and stuff like that. Or are y'all these American Puerto Ricans that, that are different, and, and so on.
I think you said too, culturally, those in every culture, there's that dynamic, right? So whether or not you're black and eat greens or not, or if you, my daughter just came back from an internship in Kenya.
Yes.
And so there she is in Kenya, and she describes the story of this little girl asking her, well, where are you from? She's like, well, I'm not really sure. Oh. And the little girl was just appalled that here's this other chocolate young woman wasn't really clear about her origin. I'm like, well, our ancestry leaves are coming soon. Hold on, we're waiting for the kid to come back.
Yeah.
But that, and so there's a shame and a judgment. But like you said, this is where you were born.
Yeah.
This is how this worked out, and still we are all unraveling those storms when it comes to identity, especially when you're reaching for a culture that's already in you, but you still have to reach for it. And to be able to articulate that is something I was really impressed with, because like you said, in every culture, there's who you are, there's what's expected of you, and then there's what society lets happen.
Yeah. It was like at that time, right? The discovery of like, okay, this is my detachment from that culture, but also being with the power grids being down, very much disconnected from the island. You can't travel to the island. People can't leave the island. So I was like, literally, I knew what I didn't have and there was no way to get it. And so that made I wanted it more. And so then I began to almost like dig into journalism, to news stories, read so many news stories and engulf it and turn them into poems and engulf it and turn it into poems. And it's just, I think there was this time too, and we had it this summer where, we were baptized in information, maybe this past 2020, right? Where it was like, hey, know about it. We're all going to know, and we're all going to know together, and what we're going to do about it. Now you're accountable. Now you're accountable. Now you're accountable. And the journalism, for a sense, as a Puerto Rican, made me accountable. It was like, what's going on. And the beginning of the poems, the beginning of this chapbook creation was that helpless, I don't know what's going on, woe is me. And I think by the end of the creation of the poems was the process of figuring it out, no matter how much it hurt to do so. You know what I mean?
Hello, life journey and accountability. How are you doing? It gets cute till it gets real, right? Well, tell me what's outside of this project. What are you don't let those go. Once you get those skills of how to dig and to research, not that you're just learning how to research, you got a whole degree and whatnot, but applying it this way, what are you digging into next?
For sure. I'm digging into the past a lot more, you know what I mean? And thinking about the young man who was right before I learned about poetry. Because when I learned about poetry, then I knew I had an avenue to express. But I'm realizing that boy before poetry didn't. And so he has stories and he has troubles and he has lessons that he never got to write about because he never knew that skill, And high school was just too many. So I started just like there and, And so now I'm realizing, I was like, okay, there is stories of, with me at Mayfair Mall, and there's stories there with my boys, with Rico, and Rico is a character who needs to be in my poems, you know what I mean? Like, and all of my friends and family, and just thinking about that, like, level of how we can immortalize and make our people beautiful by just talking about them. Us as poets, I mean, you know what I mean? Like, we truly have that power, right? And people know it. You say you write a poem about somebody to somebody, they shit their pants, excuse me. But they're like, yo, but that's deep, And you forget how much magic that is to say I wrote you a poem, you know what I mean?
And the idea of going back and writing that younger version of you, and not to that person, that's not that prompt particularly, but holding that person in your spirit as you're creating, because we're hearing this a lot. And I'm in a gendered way. I'm like, oh, the boys are being told this too. Because we're always talking, go forgive that inner girl. Go hug that little girl who didn't get so it's your little person, all of you out there, and regardless of how you identify, go hug your little person someone didn't apologize to that 7-year-old version of you, or the 8-year-old version of you never apologized for that thing that you did or didn't do. And all of that sediment is in there. So I welcome that as a reminder across the board, and either think it through, meditate it through, write about it, but definitely all the stages that we have been we have more tools now, like you said, to go back, and you can always go back. You don't have to dwell, but we can definitely go back and give that little person some love, right?
For sure.
Let me ask you this. Let's get into, speaking of lines of poetry. Where did this line of poetry take you? Disturbing the listening air.
Well, the listening air is just dope. You know what I mean? And that concept of that, because it makes me think about the air as like a thing of necessity that we all need. This thing of like atmosphere that we're all around, right? And so I feel like it's just that everybody is listening, and in that regard, in some way, shape, or form, whether you believe it or not, And a lot of the times we're actively listening for things that we want to hear, right? So listening as a skill is a, subjective thing. We want to listen to what we want to listen to, and there's where the disturbing comes in, right? Because when you want to disturb it, you're trying to stir you're trying to stir some stuff, Yes. And that there's somebody, and we have those conversations, and we probably, this past year, there's been a lot of that too, where it's like, there's been more of an agency to have the difficult conversation, whatever that is. Yeah. And as I've been growing up personally, it comes, it's just in large ways, in the sense of like race and our nation and just everything like that. But just in the sense of like a person as well, knowing that like, it's hard to have conversations with people you love. It's like hard conversations with people you love. You know what I mean? It's hard to be vulnerable when you feel wrong. You know what I mean? Like all of those like real hard things that we don't ever want to say out loud, and is the reason why we get upset when we're wrong, or is the reason why we get loud in an argument. It's just that we don't want that. We don't want that, but it's necessary. And as the older I grow, the more I begin to realize that pain is weakness leaving the body, right?
Pain is weakness leaving the body.
Right. Or in the sense of, I always tell my students, where it's like, if you feel awkward, that is the whackness leaving your body, right? If they're up on stage for the first time and I'm like, you feel that awkward feeling, you don't know what to do with your body? That's the whackness just getting out of you. And you're just getting cooler by the second, you know what I mean? And it's true. Ain't it? Like, it's so true.
I'm taking that.
It's so true. Like, we just keep, you know what I mean? Like, we just keep putting ourselves in these situations that make us uncomfortable, and they make us stronger, you know what I mean, afterwards. And so I just think that it's important to not only disturb the listening air, right, but also to disturb it from like a self point of view, where it's like, hey, we need to have this conversation that's not easy. Or hey, even what the hardest conversations to have that are not easy are the small shits, where you're just like, like, you didn't wash the dish. You didn't wash the dish, right? And you're gonna squash it, and but then that dish is gonna come back and it's gonna rear its ugly head in the wrong time, right? It takes a real human to talk about that dish in the moment, to say that dish in the moment, because then it just squashes the ant, right? Instead of letting the ant turn into this monster. You know what I'm saying?
Then the ant becomes Godzilla, and you're talking, and so then this argument you're having is about the dish and the coffee cup and the door and the time that you didn't. And you're right. Excuse me.
Right.
How to say those things in the moment. Thank you. And and you're absolutely right. It's that first impulse is how we feel about especially if you're wrong, even kind of wrong. And that think about all of that energy that just on reflex, don't even think about it, starts building up about how you're not that wrong, or you're not the only one who's wrong, or you're not so wrong. And I wouldn't be wrong if you wouldn't focus. How can you, and in this moment. So all of those, you were talking about, we listen in a certain way. I've had this language, we have these habits of conversation, right? So there's a way sometimes that we enter a conversation, and we always enter it that way, whether it's authentic or not. There's a way that we handle conflict. And there are things scripts that, well, when he says this, then I should say that, and then she'll say this, and then I'll. And yes, society and etiquette and being polite, all of that has its place. But like you're right, would you say we've been baptized in information and research and difficult? We know now we can do it and still come out on the other side without exploding. But we still have to do it more. So I hope that we hold on to that moving as the world begins to unlock a little bit. So anybody who says back to normal, I have concerns with them because there is no back to. There's definitely bringing forward things that we need to keep. But everything is going to be some brand of brand new moving forward. So hopefully these tough conversations be a part of everyone's experience, but definitely you put some work into making it part of how you move.
Yeah, for sure.
Ooh, your partner's gonna be like, all right already with the dish.
No.
You're like, can we have a small important conversation right now? Can we have
Nah, yeah, it's tough. But even with, and it's with friends. It's with your coworkers, it's with anybody you have a relationship with of any kind. Right.
Do you have a tip of something you've learned on how to do that? Any key phrases or?
You know what? It's something similar where it's like somebody, I forgot where it was, but it's this thing, we were just talking about this earlier, but it was like a quote, but it was from, and like, it was like, talk to yourself like a little kid, like you would talk to a little kid that you loved, like your niece or your nephew. And in that same regard, that love, because sometimes I talk to myself negatively, like, you dummy, like, you know what I mean? Or I'll be like, damn, you're so ignorant for that. Like, why would you do that? Like, or like, you should have known better. Things really, really ugly things you would say to yourself that I wouldn't say to my niece, you know what I mean? So it's like, I got to talk to myself like that. And in the same regard, you then think of that like another adult. Like, you're also not going to let no other adult talk crazy to your niece neither, right? Like, or to your little child neither. So it's on some, hey, that's me though, you know what I mean? And I think in order for me to take care of me, I need to tell you this early, because my heart breaks real easily at slip number 3. Woo, like glass, you know what I mean? But then I cover it up from slip 1 and 2. So you don't know that it's glass until it's already on the ground breaking. I need to tell you about that glass from jump.
Yes.
From jump, I need to tell you about the glass. Because then it becomes less of, the carelessness it's become less of my burden. The carelessness that happens, right? Like, it's me being careless with not telling you that this, that, and the third, or that,
Hey, life, how you doing? Look at you.
I'm telling you.
He said it's real.
That's real.
Yeah, managing conflict is a thing. Oh, I really appreciate them. I would love to, if there's anything else that you have coming up or anything that you'd like the folks to know, or any other thoughts before I share where this line comes from.
I think that I would say it's okay to be disturbed. And the word disturbed is an ugly word that you don't want to feel, but it is okay, right? It is okay. And the worst that could happen sometimes is that you'll disturb. That's the worst, right? So like, why not just say what you have to say, or be what you have to, but also just on some just business type stuff. Catch a Glow is out on Finishing Line Press for anybody who is interested and wants to read a little bit of my poetry. Also, I have a new poem in the Madison Review right now. You can get a hard copy. You can read it online. It's pretty dope. It's a poem about me as a shorty in Milwaukee, which is exactly what I was talking about. And you can follow me at OYE414 on any social media platform.
Most excellent.
Thank you.
Thank you. I really appreciate you making this time to come and chat with me, and especially following this line of poetry. And as you know, we follow these lines all over the place, and where they land us is always in a better place. So I'm really glad to be on this journey with you, sir. So going to have him step back in the green room, and we are going to get an idea of where this line of poetry comes from. Disturb the Listening Air. It's actually called a piece from The Slave Mother by Frances Harper. So I'm going to read that with us. The Slave Mother. Heard you that shriek? It rose so wildly on the air, it seemed as if burdened heart was breaking in despair. Saw those hands so sadly clasped, the bowed and feeble head, the shuddering of that fragile form, that look of grief and dread. Saw you that sad, imploring eye, its every glance was pain, as if a storm of agony were sweeping through the brain. She is a mother pale with fear. Her boy clings to her side, and in her kirtle vainly tries his trembling form to hide. He is not hers, although she bore for him a mother's pains. He is not hers, although her blood is coursing through his veins. He is not hers, for cruel hands may rudely tear apart the only wreath of household love that binds her breaking heart. His love has been a joyous light that o'er her path has smiled, a fountain gushing ever new amid life's desert wild. His lightest word has been a tone of music round her heart, their lives a streamlet bent in one. Oh, Father, must they part? They tear him from her circling arms, her last and fond embrace. Oh, nevermore may her sad eyes gaze his mournful face. No marvel then, these bitter shrieks disturb the listening air. She is a mother, and in her heart is breaking in despair. And that piece is called The Slave Mother by Frances Ellen Watkins Harper. And this has been A Line Meant with Dasha Kelly Hamilton. We will see you again next month as we explore another conversation through another line of poetry.